everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Nabeel. I'm going to be talking through one of nature's most primal questions, and especially for you guys in the payments industry. There are so many wallets. Which one of them will triumph? Just a little bit about myself first. I thought it's always good for you to know who is speaking. So I used to be, and I started my career as, can be classified as a professional Googler or management consultant at Deloitte back in the day. And then inside the payments industry, I've worked for Visa, what was Net, and now is Nexi. Actually, a lot of talk has been, a lot of questions have been asked about the influence of ChatGPT on payments and commerce. No one's asked what's going to happen to management consultants, by the way. That's probably a big industry that's going to be impacted. I actually ended up being one of the youngest people working in payments regulation. Almost half, sometimes, I measured the age of everyone talking about IFR and PSD2. But that really gave me a strong insight into the payments industry, how it works end to end, all the way from merchant, all the way back up the value chain to the issuers as well. And most recently, I've been super interested in e-commerce, like the whole ecosystem, not just the payments part of it, but where payments fits in to everything else. And of course, naturally, that brought up the topic of mobile wallets, which I'll talk about today. Great. Before I dive into wallets and blah, 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 I'll talk about the payment method landscape. I think it's good to frame this in the wider taxonomy of what's happening in the world of payments. So like all of my favorite things, all the global payment methods happen to be also American. You can see here traditional names that you recognize, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, all US-based, all mostly card-based as well. That's an important point to note, and Rails is going to come up a bit more later. PayPal is probably the most prominent wallet that we have in the world already today, ubiquitous around the world. XPays are growing. They've grown out from having mobile devices and pushed out into the hands of consumers like that across both channels, online and offline. And of course, card schemes, who used to be about plastic, are now also thinking about what it means for them to be in a mobile-based world, right? And they've had many attempts at it, to be honest. MasterPass has existed for a while. I used to work at Visa. There used to be something called V.me, if you've worked in payments for a long time. Visa Checkout, and now you see this the logo there, which used to also be called SRC, and now it's called Click to Pay, right? So I wonder what's next. The next layer of the circle of payment methods is, you could basically call that not American, not card, but we can call that European for now. Tend to be regulator driven, and very much focused on the rails, right? So it's about SEPA instant credit transfers. And then I was a British person. I only knew cards when I lived in England and lived in London. Then I moved to Copenhagen, that's where I live now. And then I realized there's a whole other world of payment methods that people use, and they don't just use cards, right? So there can be a mix across Europe of local card schemes, bank buttons, like literally direct bank integration that you use to shop online, domestic wallets, mobile pay, VIP, Swish are an example of that. And they tend to be Rails agnostic, but most of the time they actually happen to be card as well. Why do those payment methods matter? Keeps us all occupied at conferences like this. But actually, from the merchant's perspective, are there merchants in the room, by the way? Oh, a minority of, oh no, okay, quite a lot, actually. Cool. What do you guys care about? That's conversion. You just want sales, right? Payments is a way to get sales. At the same time, you also care about cost, because you don't want the cost of payments to be too high. That's just eating into your margin, right? So the delicate balancing act between having loads of payment methods, which exist in this circle, and having the right payment methods for your customer at the low cost. I think Octavian, you had a slide which said there's going to be 4.8 billion digital wallets by 2024. So my circles are going to look a bit different in 2 years' time. Wallets. I actually found this somewhere on LinkedIn. I didn't know the source. I had to put it somewhere on the internet. Conversion is great. What you need to do is offer the customer all the payment methods that they want to pay with, and those need to be easy to use. Except that often it can get too much, because you don't want a checkout that looks like this. I think this is a Shopify checkout, you can see by the design. This is probably a bit too much, but one thing you should note about all of these is express checkouts tend to be dominated by wallets. They're all wallets. Look, Shop Pay, Apple Pay, PayPal, Affirm, Amazon Pay, Facebook Pay, Starbucks Pay. They're all wallets, right? So let's discuss what wallets are. They're essentially a representation of identity, right? All the wallets we have in the Nordics use mobile phone as basically the identifier of the consumer. identifier of their payment credentials, but they have an app, and the way you access that person, the way they identify themselves is a mobile phone number. And maybe other apps in the future will have a different type of identifier. But mobile phone number, everyone knows that, so that tends to be really easy. The wallet also is a store of payment credentials. Could not be card, but most of the time it is card because they're the easiest to use. We understand them. The SEP process is created by Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and we know that we can use them in all payment situations, all use cases, whether it's fueling, retail, hospitality, whatever. There's a use case designed on card rails for that. And of course, there are types of wallets that are e-money institutions. They must have to have a license to be able to do that. But they can also store monetary value in there. You can have value in that account. It's not just a wrapper of a payment method. Another taxonomy, I like taxonomy, so I can break things down into smaller and smaller chunks, right? So we had payment method landscape before. This is what I'd like to call the wallet landscape. So you recognize from bottom to top, merchant wallets, Amazon Pay. I think the other page had Starbucks Pay. I don't know if that's a real thing or is a joke, but if Starbucks Pay exists, cool. It's also out there in the merchant wallet space. There's payment wallets, PayPal, SRC, Click to Pay also exists. Very global stuff, very card-based stuff. And then, of course, the X-Base, like the new kids on the block, but they've had like massive, massive growth in the last few years, mostly offline. But also very card-based. Then comes local wallets. And the reason I put them in pink or purple, however they appear here, is that they have some defining characteristics. They happen to mostly be owned by banks, actually, banks in the local markets. They're all domestic, so they're not trying to be global. They're like domestic from day one. And of course, they switch between cards and account to account, right? The circles on the left-hand side, they're Harvey balls. As I said, I was a consultant before. They'll come back in a second. So if I'm a typical retailer in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Poland, what does my payment mix look like today? And this is like just indicative, right? I have to put all the caveats there. Not real numbers, but they're indicative. This is what my payments mix will look like. As you can see in Denmark, for example, the #1 payment wallet in Denmark, it's mobile pay. And it can be anywhere between 40 to 50% of the merchant's payment mix. Mobile pay, again, is just a wrapper around payment methods. And the payment method can either be the local scheme, or it can be an international card scheme, right? Same with Vipps in Norway, which happens to be a very card-based country. Swish in Sweden is and Blick actually. Swish and Blick are the outliers because they're like not card-based payments, but equally growing. Why? Because they have these things. Great user experience. They're all app first. So the consumer doesn't need to sign in anywhere else besides download an app. The app has great user experience because you can identify yourself easily. Remember, most of the time it's just a mobile phone number. And the other super important thing is that they're all created through cooperation between banks. Banks cooperation gets you the good user experience. Without that, you're going to struggle for user experience. You're going to struggle for distribution because each bank creates their own app, and that creates complexity as well for the consumer. And a lot of the time, at least in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, the first use case was P2P, right? So you got it in the hands of everyone in the population because they had a free app that they can use to transfer money between their friends. There's a bit of a challenge for these players. It's at scale. So you can be the #1 player in your country, but if P2P is your main use case, then you're incurring a lot of cost. And unless you start charging the consumer 1 krona per transaction between their friends, then you're going to have to run this as a cost center until you grow to enough scale in e-commerce that you can start to retrieve back the revenue, right? So what we saw last year was that Vipps and mobile pay merged. They're going to try to create, I'm not saying to create a Nordic wallet, but they're going to try to create something out of the 2 countries that they operate in. And we're going to see, I think, more and more moves from wallets like this. I know there's something called MPE. That's a cooperation between banks across Europe. They may also try to think about leveraging the domestic scale to a European level. Let's see. Again, like most of the time I've talked about so far, everything from not from the consumer perspective, from the merchant and industry perspective, but ultimately who decides? It's the consumer, and all they want to do is buy stuff. They don't really care if they're using SEPA and credit rails, or they're using a Visa, MasterCard, or a Dancourt. They just want to buy stuff, right? So they have a natural friction with the other end of the spectrum, which is banks who also want you to be able to buy stuff. I hope they do. But they also care about security, right? They want to prevent fraud, they want to secure money. So there's a natural friction always between buying stuff easily and doing what the bank wants to do, which is secure the payments and ensure integrity of the ecosystem. Consumers care about three things, I would say. Ease of use, and we've discussed why local wallets are really good at that, why XPays are really good at that. They care about ubiquity. They want to be able to do the same thing everywhere. They want it to be accepted everywhere. They also care about relevance, and this is the P2P point, because if they can use one mobile wallet for more than one thing, that creates sustainability, longevity, and the lifetime of the wallet. If you have to pull out a different wallet and a different app for every single different thing that you do, over time, I think the consumer usage would drop. So let's see how this plays out across the different use cases. And I think it's very use case dependent. P2P, I think I mentioned it before, local mobile wallets win because they're in the hands of everyone. They have it for free. They know what to do with it. They've been using it for a long time. Point of sale, I don't think there's any greater example of great user experience at point of sale than XPays. Local mobile wallets did try. Of course, everyone knows that the Apple has locked the NFC chip. At least for now, regulators are looking at that. But without that NFC, being able to just tap your phone instead of tapping plastic, then XPays will always win out on point of sale against local mobile wallets who've had to use either Bluetooth technology or QR codes. And QR codes actually made a resurgence during COVID time, so maybe there's a way back for it. But I know Vips, for example, had announced that they're actually retreating from trying to do point of sale stuff. E-commerce, okay, it depends on the country, so it's a little bit misleading. But where there are local mobile wallets in each country, they tend to win, and they're growing the fastest in e-commerce, and we see that as a PSP. Mostly because of the ease of use. Again, you just need to type in your phone number, and you get a push notification on your phone, you approve it on your phone, and that's basically it. No need to type out 16 digits. And in mobile use cases, XPay is actually typically winning as well because of the fact that when you're on the device, let's take Apple as an example, Apple Pay is pushed right to the top of in-app experiences and sometimes in browser-based experiences too. So you don't even get choice, really. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. So let's bring this back. Harvey balls, like it's my comfort zone. P2P, local mobile wallets are the strongest. The other thing to point out is that point of sale, XPays are the strongest. Besides that, it's all a bit of a mixed bag, right? So we'll get some movements here and there, and it depends on which country you're really operating in. I speak really fast, by the way, and I've got lots of slides to cover, so just find me afterwards if you want to talk about something in detail. We've talked about global, we've talked about local in a bit more detail. Let's talk European now. And there are like a few different initiatives happening around Europe. This EPI, payment scheme, and I put the German flag because it actually started as truly European, and now it's all whittled down to just Germany, at least in the pilot stage. The central bank digital currencies, just like disclosure. Nexi is a member of the first stakeholder group with Amazon, I think, working on digital euro across Europe for the European Central Bank. And there's also something, again, now it's coming full circle. It's like digital ID again. Digital ID is also linked to payments, this EIDAS 2.0. It's talked about as being linked to some type of payments. I don't know what they're going to create. But there's a problem. And the problem that the good thing about everything else we talked about is a problem in this case, or a barrier to overcome when you're trying to create a new European digital wallet, right? There has to be a compelling use case, and regulators need to understand the motivations behind why consumers pick things. And that might not always be the case when you're trying to force them to use something via their bank. It has to be a compelling case for PSPs as well. They're the distributors of the payment method. And for banks, because they're ultimately the creators of the payment method, or they have to support it, like we saw with PSD2. You have to open up your APIs so that consumers and third parties can use it. So the question is, for each of those different stakeholders, if I'm a consumer, this is just another wallet. Like, why should I use this one? That's a barrier that they need to overcome. If I'm a distributor, I'd say, well, I have loads of things I need to prioritize. Why should I focus on this? Why should I prioritize click to pay, for example, as well? And if I'm a creator, bank, it also just feels like a cost center. How much priority should I give it? So we're still in the status quo. There are these global wallets, there are local wallets, and I crossed it out because it's not really versus, but they have to coexist. There's also super apps and what I like to call hidden wallets, right? So let's talk about them a bit. This, if you're in payments, looks quite familiar, just like all the different elements of the payment ecosystem. Payment methods, risk, acquiring, collecting, processing, settlement, scheme relations, blah, blah, blah. But that's not commerce. This is just payments, right? Where does payments fit into commerce? Well, it's actually just a small cog. It's just one tiny little circle there. So there's a lot more going on around shopping than just payments. I just want to talk about 3 of the different things that are happening in the ecosystem of commerce. So I thought the video was going to be really blurry. Actually, it looks quite good. This is my Shop Pay app. And if you're in the Shopify ecosystem, as a merchant or as a consumer, you can download the Shop Pay app. And basically, you can start to get access to places you've shopped before, places you can shop again. I bought my wife some earrings once on a Shopify store. That's when I downloaded this app. And basically, you can see they're trying to integrate shopping experience with the payment experience. And often, the line is completely blurred. You don't know what you're doing. You're just having access to finding information on where you've shopped, your shipping details. And I have my American Express in there, for example. The same thing. Now Shop Pay is like the ecosystem of Shopify. So it's slightly closed off to the wider e-commerce ecosystem. Klarna is also doing the same. It works, great. You can also see that they're trying to create an app. And they're also trying to get merchants to come on board, consumers to come on board, and again, blur the lines between shopping and paying. Of course, with Klarna in mind, they also want to promote their BNPL solution. So the angle that they have is quite different to Shopify. Shopify, when you lock you into the ecosystem, Klarna wants you to buy with BNPL solution. And the third one is Grab. I'm not going to talk about it, but it's mostly in Asia as well. I'm running out of time. So the last thing I'll finish with, right? If I'm a PSP, which I am, PSP Gateway Checkout Solution, I'm worried because the merchants want to create their own thing, the wallets want to create their own thing, other payment methods want to create their own thing. Well, how about I reinvent myself? I also think of myself as a wallet of wallets. So there's still going to be merchants who want to work directly with a payment service provider or via a third-party distributor, but they'll still work with them. So what we need to do is adapt the user experience that we have to fit more like the wallet solutions that exist out there. And that's how we're going to stay competitive, how we offer merchants the same user experience they get with wallets directly that they can offer to their consumers to make it as much of a one-click experience as possible. I would have to authenticate in my mobile pay app. That's what's happening here. Cool. I will just leave this for you to read because I know we're out of time. Thank you very much.